Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk Destiny virtual talk show. I'm really excited today about this subject that we're going to be discussing because it is something that for many reasons in our society is still a great big secret, and there's still a lot of stigma surrounding it. And as I said, when I first started getting these wonderful people together, that people are coming out about everything. And that's fine, that's wonderful. But we don't want to come out about our mental health issues. And that concerns me because mental health issues are something that affect all of us. And we can hide it behind our faith, we can hide it behind scriptures, we can hide it behind whatever. But the reality is that many of us are dealing with this. And I am just excited to have these people with me today who are so willing to be transparent about their personal issues with depression and suicide. And our goal is that we would help somebody else to understand that, number one, you're not alone. And number two, you can survive. You can get through this because we've been there. Some of us are still dealing with depression sometimes, but we have learned how to take our pain and use it and not waste it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, I'd like to begin by asking each of my guests to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself as far as what your occupation is or hobbies or something like that. Let's begin with Miss Margaret.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Johnson Hodge. I'm an award-winning national best-selling author, and I also am a writing instructor, writing coach, and usher at my church.
Okay, Shantae.
Hi, my name is Shantae West. I actually work with the intellectual disabled population, so I understand this all too well. And I just enjoy cooking and loving on my family.
Okay, Tremaine.
Hello, I'm Tremaine Moore. I'm an accountant by day, author by night. And wow, what do? I cook, I clean, let's see, I take care of my wife. And what was I going to say? I lost my thought. And I'm working on becoming a licensed minister at my current church.
Awesome. All right, Boo, let's go.
Hey, I'm Jason Green. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with all of the other guests. I am a commercial real estate professional by day and a certified health and life coach. And I battle depression.
Awesome. And one of the reasons that I wanted each of us to say something about who we are and what we do is because I want it to be clear that depression attacks people from all walks of life. And it doesn't discriminate. So you can be a minister. I was listening as Jermaine was talking. I was ordained into ministry at age 17. And I was 32 when I was hospitalized and diagnosed with major depression and anxiety disorder. And so there was a lot of question about how can you be a Christian? How can you have God in your life and you be depressed and, that whole thing. But I wanted to be clear that faith and mental health issues are not enemies. And so that's why I wanted you all to talk about what you do, and so that people who watch this will understand that it affects everybody. I had a young lady who inboxed me when she saw this call, and she didn't want to be on the panel, and she didn't want to have her name spoken, but she also is a real estate, she's into the real estate business. And one of the things she said to me that broke my heart, because as silly as I act on social media, and I'm always, making people laugh, whatever, but I'm very sensitive. And especially when it comes to people's feelings, and when other people are hurting, I'm hurting. And she said to me that she had cancer twice, and she won the battle with cancer, but she battles depression every day to the point that she just wants to die. And so she often asks God, why did you let me live through the cancer, but you won't fix this? And I just broke down because like, what do you say? You know, how do you answer that question? And so I just wanted to point that out, that there are people everywhere hurting that we will never know. And this is a young lady that I interact on social media all the time and had no idea that she was dealing with that. So I appreciate you guys and your honesty. Okay, I want to start with, first I want to ask you, and I want everybody to answer for yourself. Do you feel like depression and suicide are still subjects that people are uncomfortable talking about? What is your experience with that? And you can just go in whatever order you like.
It is kind of taboo in both secular and Christian, ironically. I've found that it's almost like with some people, it's like you got the plague. If you're even thinking about suicide, it's like, oh, get away from me. Or they pick and choose who they want to help when it comes to suicide. So I've seen that it can be discriminatory, and it can be almost like, how do I describe it? It's one of those, yeah, some people will want to help, and then some people will look at you like, I don't want to deal with you. You can fend for yourself, whether you have faith or not. So, I mean, it's a subject we don't want to talk. It's like we want to mask it in most cases.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to describe your experience with that?
I'll say I agree as well, because it's still like the silent killer, I believe. A lot of people are afraid to talk out about it because they're afraid of being judged. And then a lot of times, like when talking about faith, I know a lot of people think that you can't be depressed and have faith, because if you're supposed to have faith, you should trust God to take that away. Well, it doesn't just work like that. I'm speaking from someone that has faith. So I just feel like there is a strong narrative that we have to break down, like that stigma that we have to truly break, and let it know that it's okay to have those feelings, but we have to learn to express our feelings truly, and not let it be a cry at the end, like when the person does something and then it's like everyone comes to their rescue, because there were signs leading up to that they were feeling that way. It's just we ignore the signs.
Miss Margaret, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. And I think it was Tremaine who was talking about church, and Shantae was talking about faith. And interesting thing is, the part that we forget as Christians is church is not for the well. Church is for the sick. And we constantly seem to forget that. So when we have someone come into our church community who is not well, we expect them to arrive well. Well, if they was that well, they wouldn't need to be in church.
Yes, ma'am.
That's just my full set.
Yeah. Jason, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I think the other panelists did a great job of talking about depression as it relates to particularly in the faith-based community. And it's so strange to me, because I've experienced that, right? But at the same time, it baffles me why people will focus on their physical health and oftentimes get the help that they need physically. But when it comes to their mental health, there's this apprehension to address it. And if I'm honest, I was one of those people. And I think conversations like this are going to help people realize that you're not alone in that battle. So I think this is really important. And I think that everything that was said thus far really resonated with me there.
And I totally understand, and I agree with what everyone has said. Also, I'd like to say that my sister, Kelly Green Adams, just joined us. She is a family therapist, and she also understands the consequences of the battles of dealing with depression, and helping me even with my anxiety, sometimes even now, because I was diagnosed in 1995, and I still have days when I get really anxious, and I'm to the point where it's incapacitating. Like I can't even do anything. And I'll call her and I'm like hyperventilating, and she just kind of talked me through it. and it gets me to focus on something else until I'm better. But I do want to say this before I have her introduce herself in response to what we were just talking about. I remember when I first went to the hospital, I thought I was having a heart attack because I couldn't breathe, my chest was hurting, so forth and so on. I was in college and I had two children, a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old, 4-year-old and 13-year-old. I was going to school, working at my parents' church, and it was just too much. And I woke up that morning, I had a final exam at college, and I woke up with a full-blown migraine. And then I remember it hurt so bad, I was crawling to the bathroom. I couldn't even stand up. And my chest was hurting. And so I crawled to the door where my sister was staying with me at the time. And I banged on the door and I'm like, call 911. I'm having a heart attack. So when I get to the hospital, they run different tests or whatever, and they say it's not a heart attack. So, but they did give me something for the migraine. So then the doctor's like, well, we're going to turn the lights down, let you sleep for a few minutes. Well, he's on the way out the door. He says, so how are you feeling now? And I remember saying these words that changed the trajectory of my whole life. I said, I wish I could go to sleep and not wake up. Honestly, when I said those words, I wasn't thinking about dying as much as I just wanted the pain to stop. So I went to sleep. When I woke up, there was a young lady standing at the foot of the bed. She had a white jacket on, and her name was Julie, and it said mental health unit. So she said to me that she had been called to come talk to me because I had suicidal suicide ideas. I was like, I don't have suicide. She said, well, this is what you said. And I said, but that doesn't mean I wanted to die. I need some rest. I have a toddler and I have a preteen. He's starting to act out, blah, blah, blah. I'm telling her this whole story. So she says to me, well, the fact that you even made that statement says that there's some stressors that we need to talk about. So why don't you spend the night here with us and then we'll talk about it in the morning. Kind of like a good idea to me because I'm like, okay, I can just sleep. I say, okay, fine. They take me up to the mental health unit. It wasn't until I was admitted up there that I was told I was put on a 72-hour hold, that I thought I was just spending the night and going home. I didn't know anything about the 72-hour hold. So it just turned into a whole thing. And then I shut down because number one, I'm an ordained minister. Number two, both of my parents are ministers. Like the whole community knows that, I felt like I was embarrassing the family, bringing shame on the name, just the whole thing. And I remember this, and then I'm gonna get back to you all. But I remember my father saying, once my sister contacted them and told them where I was, and my father said to the counselor, we are people of faith. So we're going to take her home and pray, and whatever's wrong with her, God will fix it. And the counselor responded, sir, I too am a woman of faith. But if you were called and told that she'd had a heart attack and she was admitted to the hospital with some type of heart disease, you wouldn't say, let's just take her home and pray for her, she'll be fine. If she had her blood pressure went so high that she had a stroke, you wouldn't say that. So let's do the same thing and get her the help she needs for her mental health issues. And that meant a lot to me because it was the first time I heard somebody say that, yes, we can still pray, but we're going to address this issue as well. Because as I think it was Jason, or I think it was Jason who said, it might have been Miss Margaret, we easily will say, come to church with your pocketbook full of all kinds of medicines for blood pressure, gout, everything. But for God's sake, don't say you have anything in there for depression or anxiety. So we have got to change the narrative and remove the stigma. And that's what this conversation is about today. So I'm going to go ahead and allow my sister, Kelly, who's not showing her face for some reason, to introduce herself and just tell us a little bit about what you do. There's her face.
Hi. Well, I wasn't showing my face because I was moving around. And if it's one thing I find very irritating on Zoom is when somebody is in the background and someone else is talking and they're moving all around and people are like, well, they sit down. So if I have to move, I always take my picture off. But hi, I'm Kelly Green Adams. And as Jamie has said, I am her sister. I am also a mental health therapist. I have been in the field of mental health therapy for 8+ years. My focus, the thing that I do deal most with is depression, grief and loss. I do, and substance use, mainly because I find the substance use is usually a masking for the other things, like not knowing how to grieve, not knowing how to deal with depression and anxiety. So I've had experience with a lot of that, but my main focus, like right now, I'm certified to do trauma-focused therapy because a lot of what happens is from a process of buildup over the years that we haven't addressed. And then finally it comes out. I will say very quickly, I don't know if this is the time to say whatever, but I did want to say that a lot of times we ignore depression as just like being sad. But I really want us to understand today, and hopefully an opportunity in this conversation will allow me to just share how you can know, like, there are depressions that are situational and there are depressions that are not treated, that can go untreated. It puts your life on hold and then becomes a disorder, like major depressive disorder, or, you know, some women just have it like around their hormonal changes, but the feelings are real and shouldn't be ignored. I will say that because it does tie into people having a sense of hopelessness and then having a sense of suicidal ideations and things of that nature, because everybody has thought it, but people who are depressed many times are consumed with the thought, and therein lies where we have suicide attempts and rates increasing in our society.
Okay, well, there goes my baby sister, and y'all can tell she likes to talk.
My profession, Miss Green.
Don't laugh, don't encourage her. And then not only is she a therapist, but she's a minister. And so, you know, she can really talk. Okay, moving on. That's my girl.
As long as Shantae doesn't laugh.
Oh Lord, they have a personal issue going on. Because I got put in Facebook jail because of Shantae. And my sister was asking people for bail money to get me out of Facebook jail. And Shantae said, no, let her stay in there. So my sister hasn't forgiven her yet. And I don't think I have either, but I just haven't mentioned it. Okay, moving on. Okay. I want to ask you all, and I want you to be as transparent as you're comfortable being. I think each of us has experienced depression, and some of us have even had suicidal thoughts. And then some of us, like myself, have even attempted suicide, but obviously it didn't work. But I want to ask you first, I want to start with Ms. Margaret. When you experienced the depression, was it a life event that caused it? Was it a biological change and you didn't know what was going on? And how did you finally get diagnosed with it?
Okay, what happened was my husband passed away unexpectedly from an aneurysm in April of 2004. So, and it was so mind-blowing because literally the day that early morning, we had flown back from New York from burying his grandfather. So we're in New York for the weekend. We bury his grandfather. All his family is there. He has family all over the world. Everybody's talking about the family reunion we're gonna have, and I think it was St. Martin or whatever that following summer. We all left on a high note. Flight was delayed. We got in late. We got in about 2:30 in the morning. We go to bed. And 8:30 in that morning, I was in my office. My husband's dressed. He has on his jogging gear, and he says to me, "I'm gonna go running." He said, "I'm gonna go running." He said, "Jogging." He said, "But I'm not gonna run. I'm gonna walk," because I was always on him about him thinking he's still young. He kissed my forehead and he left out. And I was like, he probably wants to process losing his grandfather. So he left out about 8:30. About 10 o'clock, no husband. 10:30, no husband. I ended up driving around the neighborhood looking for him. And I'm thinking, he young, he out there jogging, he don't have no ID. He probably laying up in the hospital. They don't know who he is. Wait till I see him, I'm gonna curse him out. Long story short, yes, he was out jogging. He collapsed. He had no ID. They had literally taken him away in the ambulance like an hour after he had left, but they didn't know who he was. I didn't know this. I'm driving around and some said, "Well, now you're going on 2 hours, go to the precinct." I went to the local precinct. I'm like, my husband was out jogging and he didn't come home. He has no ID. I'm thinking he's still alive. He's just laid up in the hospital with oxygen and he don't have ID. They don't know who he is. And when I see him, I'm gonna curse him out. Anyway, long story short, he had an aneurysm on the street. The EMTs got there. Witnesses said that when he was breathing until the EMTs got there, and then at that point he stopped breathing. And they took him to the hospital. They didn't have any ID. The detective at the precinct said, "We're so glad you came in." She said, "We were going to put him on the 6 o'clock news because we didn't know who he was." So, and I'm not going to try and make this too long, but I'm trying to share with you the steps because I believe in sharing my steps. It can help somebody else. Because anyway, so she says, "You want to identify the body?" I say, "Yeah." So I didn't have to go to the morgue. And there was this huge monitor up in the police office, and this picture rolled up, and there was my husband looking like he was sleeping. Okay, now I didn't know what had caused it, but I was like, my immediate thought was, I left my body. I started, well, before they told me that he had passed, when they told me he had passed, I left my body and I'm looking down at this woman screaming to the top of her lungs. I'm up in the corner, literally, and I'm looking down at this woman. I'm like, why is she screaming? I had an out of body moment. Okay, time goes on. That's April. All the family that had gone to New York to bury his grandfather, rent vans, they come down here, a bunch of people in the house, funeral arrangements, funeral homes, caskets, programs, wake, funeral, all the stuff. 2 young boys, one was 12, one was 15. I now cannot find time to mourn because I have to take care of what needs to be taken care of. That's April. July, everybody's gone, cards start coming, no more flowers, phone calls. My mother-in-law had stayed with me for about a month and a half. She had gone back home. I'm just chilling with my sons, and I'm sitting in my office watching TV, and all of a sudden, this was my moment. 3 months after my husband died, I'm watching TV. All of a sudden, I just felt like I was in a deep, dark well with no light. There was no light around me. And I remember thinking, not that I wanted to die, but I just didn't want to exist anymore. And one part of my brain is saying, "But Margaret, what about your children?" And that part that was saying, "I don't want to live anymore," was saying, they'll understand. And what about your 80-something-year-old mother? And the brain is saying, they'll understand. They'll understand that you just couldn't live anymore. It's okay. And I'm sitting there and it's dark, 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 and it's dark, 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 and it's dark, dark, dark. And I think about my kids upstairs and something said, get up, get moving. Now it's summer, I'm in Georgia. It's like 98 degrees outside. But something is saying, get up, get out, get moving. So the only thing I can think about was go to play tennis because I live in a community with tennis courts, but it's 98 degrees outside. But I knew I had to get moving, but it was too hot in that moment to take myself to the tennis court. So I had to sit in my chair for another 45 minutes, keeping myself above the darkness because I knew I had to get moving. I had to take my kids and go to the tennis court and get moving. And that was my moment. So we went to play tennis. I never shared this with anybody. We went to play tennis. I felt better. Months later, I never visited that moment again. But months later, when I finally realized I needed grief counseling, we all went into grief counseling. The counselor told me what happened. And this is the part that I really want to share. I went through trauma, but I didn't have time to grieve because I had children to raise and this to do and that to do. So I never had time to grieve. And as a result, every single drop of endorphin in my body on that day was depleted. And so when you go through trauma, it's not just a mental thing. For me, it was a physical, chemical thing in my body, but I did not know that. I just felt the darkness, but I was told by my counselor, she said, yeah, every single endorphin in your body had been depleted. She said, you were on zero. And she said, it's a good thing that you got up and moved. She said, because when you're moving, you're exercising and you're building up those endorphins. So the point is, and I'm going to wrap this up, for people who suffer loss, and I know I have many widow friends out there that I know and I may not know, just be aware. Anybody who goes through a trauma, and we strong and we Black and we this and we got to get through, take a moment. Be conscious of that because that thing snuck up on me like smoke out of nowhere, but it wasn't out of anywhere. So for anyone listening who has suffered any kind of loss or trauma, and all the counselors here, y'all can nod if I'm speaking the truth, just be aware of that. Because nothing in that moment, nothing could convince me for a hot second that staying alive was better than not. And that was my moment.
Jamie, can I say something right here? Because what you said, Miss Margaret, is really, I can hear it resounding with a lot of people that are listening. And as it's being recorded, other people will share. I always talk to people around depression is actually one of the stages of grief. And people go through the stages and they're not aware. And sometimes we get stuck in a particular stage of grief and we don't know how to move on. But the other part with depression, and I will say this, and you used a lot of clinical words like trauma, and I think people don't really understand or want to accept what trauma is because it's different for everybody. Like what could be tragedy to me could be trauma to somebody else, because trauma is life-changing. Like I can have a tragedy and it makes me sad and I but I move on. But trauma, it literally affects the rest of my entire life. And that's why people that have PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress, it's like this particular trauma has affected even my ability to the point where I relive that trauma over and over. But a lot of that comes from what you said, not addressing it and telling ourselves, using those words that you used, I didn't have time to address it. We say, I don't have time because I have this and because I have that. And I always like to paint a picture for people that come to me with depression and don't understand it and say, because I always ask this question, what does it look like to you? Because it looks different for everybody. Some people eat, some people can't eat, some people sleep, some people can't sleep, some people don't have energy to get out of the bed and do anything at all. Some people stay so busy so they don't have to think. So it looks different. But at the end of the day, it all comes from unresolved trauma. It comes from things that have happened that you didn't address because you told yourself, I don't have time to deal with that. So I say to people, imagine a closet that is empty at the beginning of your life, and imagine having a trauma at 5. And because you're 5, nobody is understanding that this has caused you trauma. So that feeling or that negative experience goes in that closet. And over the course of life, we have traumas. You and your husband may get into a big fight and he says, I want a divorce. And right when he tells you that morning, you have to take your kids to school and you got to make sure that you had the cupcakes ready for the party or it's field day. So you put that feeling in that closet and say, I'll deal with it later because right now I got to be a mother to my children. And I leave there and I have to go to work and I have to work. So I put another feeling in that closet. One day you open the door of the closet to put another negative experience, and all of those experiences come falling out of that closet. That's the day that depression hits you and you go, and most of the time when asked, what's wrong? Most people who are truly depressed go, I don't know. And that's true. You know why? Because it's not one thing, it's everything. So you could make a list. So sometimes you're crying hysterically and you're saying things that other people are saying, but that shouldn't make you be crying like that. But you know, it's like, I broke a fingernail and my tire went flat. And you're like, that's not that deep. But the truth of the matter is, there are so many other things that have piled in on you, and now you just can't take it. But you know what I say to people? The same way you ever, back in the day, they had those old-fashioned filing cabinets, and if you open 2 drawers at the same time, it all would spill over and fall out. And I said, when you see all those papers on the floor, there's only one way to get them up, one paper at a time. So as we go through therapy, we don't try to address everything. Let's just address one thing at a time. And we start with the thing that was most prominent in your mind that you feel was your start to your downward spiral. Sometimes it's the most recent event. But for you, it sounds like it was the event where you needed to have a moment to really process through the death of your partner. But you told yourself, I don't have time to do that because other people are depending on me and I have to be this person. So you lived through all of these other traumatic experiences, like almost in a daze, because you didn't bring Margaret to those experiences. Margaret was hidden back behind this trauma that she never got to address. So I mean, again, I encourage people, I tell people all the time, like my sister said, we all have had moments in our life that were traumatic, but every time we have one, we gotta stop the bus and address it and deal with it so we can be healed and whole.
Okay, Tremaine, why don't you share with us your experience that was life-changing for you with regard to your mental health?
Where do I begin? Okay, I'm gonna try to condense a lot of this because there's a lot involved. Okay. In 2010, I was given a vision by God and to write a book about my past abuse, but the main character is going to die. And the abuse, the main character's abuse was really reflective of my own life, really. And I'm like, Lord, I've never experienced suicidal thoughts before. I mean, sure, there were times I was angry and I wanted to get away from some things and all that. But sometimes you never should ask God questions like that. Well, because a year later, um, around the summer, it was around June, July, I was going through not only work problems, I was also going through personal life issues, primarily in the area of a relationship. Now, me and this particular woman, we weren't dating, but let's just say we were pretty, we had a non-sexual relationship. And I knew that I should not be with this woman in the first place because her religion has its roots in polygamy. So you kind of know where I'm going with that. So, but I was also in her life really to try to reach her on a spiritual level. It came to a head at the tail end of October, and she broke off the friendship pretty much. And it was just like a part of my life was gone. So it was like I just went numb between the work problems and her calling me saying, well, me and this guy, we decided to date it. Now, mind you, I was with her a week prior. So it was so sudden. So I just went into a dark hole. And all I was crying for at the time was somebody listen to me. And I had thought about what one brother had said to me maybe about a couple months ago via a lesson. And he said, you know, if you think about our minds are like an earthquake, you know? And if you think about it in geology, you know, the Bible says, confess your faults. In geology, a fault is what's underneath the surface and it causes an imbalance. Hence, we have the medical term chemical imbalance. So I thought about that and I'm like, will somebody listen to me? All I got was a resounding, pray for yourself or get over it. Now, mind you, earlier that year, it was told to me that I was also in counseling too, that my therapist even said to me, she said, Tremaine, you may have Asperger's. So, and I was diagnosed even in 2008, I believe, with PTSD because of the childhood abuse. And to go back to your earlier point, before the call started, we were talking about autistic. I didn't speak until I was 5. And I ended up in special education until I was 5 years old because I couldn't talk. I was behind verbally, but non-verbally, I was way ahead. So when my depression and suicide came to a head in December of 2011, when my sister was getting married for the second time, I actually sat in my hotel room the morning of my sister's wedding and wrote a suicide note. It was a cry for help. I was out of my own body at my sister's wedding. And I'm sitting here at this wedding. I'm happy for my sister, don't get me wrong. But inside, I'm just like, my dream of being married has died. And I just wanted to get away from everything and probably even everybody at that time. And as the months progressed, you know, I'm sitting in a church fellowship group, and the church I was going to at the time was actually a Caucasian church. So I found this very interesting as well. And we're talking about sin and talking about dying. I said, I feel like dying. I deserve to die. And the fellowship group leaders, they were just laughing at me, kind of laughing it off. I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I ain't even gonna talk to y'all. Y'all just a bunch of idiots. So it was the fellowship group leader's wife who was like, Tremaine, what are you talking about? I said, I'm 2 steps from suicide. So they just kind of prayed for me and then carried on business as usual. I just kind of laughed it off kind of in my head. I'm like, you know what? Y'all full of crap. So I went through the whole month of December just crying and crying. And I was still writing my book, actually. I was now thrown into the book as a result, because now the book was a vent. Because I'm like, you know, here I am crying for help. Believers and non-believers could care less if I lived or died. And I'm in counseling, that's not helping. Work, they're threatening my job. Not so much of the suicide, but because of the incident that happened it was talking about bullying, and I was bullied growing up. And my point was in this one training was, why are we allowing bullies to get away when somebody who's been victimized is trying to stand up? And I just pounded my fist on the desk, not out of anger, but I was just, because I was passionate, got a letter of reprimand. From that point, they were trying to fire me as a result. So when you take all of that into consideration, I was at a point of, I'm just going to keep my depression and suicide to myself because nobody cares. But then I thought about it, I said, you know, in the Black community, we don't care. But if we let it be our own family, then we do care. Then we want everybody to stop and pray. And this taught me a whole big lesson about always have a heart of love for people, because sadly, people in and out the church could care less if you lived or died, you know. And the suicide finally went away, but I would face another tragedy. My father would pass away. So now here I am trying to overcome my issue. Now I lose my father. That girl who left me cold calls me and says, oh, by the way, I'm now engaged. So here I am now, you know. It's like, okay, here I go again. Not so much, I think the suicide lightened up, but it was still kind of there, kind of like, I don't know. So it took finally till 2013 when it was my copy editor who she when I was going through my suicide spell, she just wanted to talk and give me advice. And I'm like, stop it. I don't need your advice right now. I just need you to listen. And it just got to an argument. And hopefully my copy editor won't mind me saying this, but she went through a suicide spell, ended up in the hospital. And now I'm talking to her, trying to comfort her. And then I don't know if it was within the same day, weeks or months later, I'm like, this is what I was trying to get you to understand when I was going through my ordeal. And I think the light bulb finally went off. And then finally, she sat down and was like, Tremaine, what are you dealing with? What are you talking about? So I had to go back 2 years to explain the whole thing. And once I got it out, I was free. And now I would meet somebody who's not my wife. You know, I think, you know, getting it out and being an ear is what's critical. And I think we just want to talk. We want to be understood. We don't want to understand, you know. And I think that was the biggest lesson and takeaway when it comes to depression and suicide, you know, having gone through it. And by the way, I knew I wasn't going to die. I think the mystery of death haunts me. You know, it's like you don't know what's over there on that side. So it's like you don't want to experience that. So I knew that was already my buffer, that I wasn't going to go down that route. But to feel like you just want to crawl up in a ball and die like Lenny Williams did, I felt that, you know. So that was probably the lowest low, was when that girl broke up our friendship, and then seeing my sister married for the second time, and I hadn't even been married, and all you wanted was to be loved, you know. And didn't experience that love growing up. Sure, my parents loved me and all that, but being protected was not in the equation, you know. And like so Mr. Margaret said, it came to a head when my dad passed, and I exploded at my mother, because she was talking about my uncle who was the one who molested me, and I just went off on her. I'm like, you can deny you're not protecting me all day long, but at the end of the day, you favored him. So it's almost like you sacrificed your own son to the devil.
And you know what I'm hearing from you and Miss Margaret so far, and from my own personal experience also, is that you just want to be heard. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to say to somebody, I am on the edge over here. And or either I've fallen down into this deep hole and I need somebody to listen to me so I can get out. In Miss Margaret's case, it was she wasn't even able to verbalize what she was going through because she had so many other responsibilities. But then the question I'm sure she had, because I had the same question, was why doesn't somebody see what's going on with me, even if I can't say it?
But you know what? I just want to say, people, I had a bunch of people around me that were always asking, are you okay? Are you okay? And I say, yeah, 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 yeah. And then the in tune ones would say, you're not okay. And I would insist, I'm okay. So there were people around me who knew I wasn't okay, but they couldn't convince me that I wasn't okay.
I got you. That's fine. I understand what you're saying.
You know, I think that's Jamie, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think that's interesting because again, it comes from where you are as an individual. And that's interesting because I heard Tremaine and Jamie like both be like, okay, the people that are close to me, don't you see that I'm not okay? I mean, and it's funny because, and I will be very transparent in this moment, and I'm sure Jamie will appreciate it. I am a person by nature who is very task driven. So I'm very focused on getting things done. So I'm a visionary. I can come up with dreams and ideas and plans, and I can tell you how to make it happen. I made it a business. Like, you got an idea? I could tell you how to make that work. But I lost it in that personality. I lost a sensitivity to human feelings, and even my own, to the point where I didn't have time. And that I was like, Miss Margaret, don't keep asking me if I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. If I'm not okay, I'm gonna make it okay. I'm gonna do what I gotta do. That's who I am, you know. But at the end of the, now that I've gotten older and I crossed over into this profession, I'm understanding more and more how important it is to be transparent with somebody. Like, you don't have to let the whole world know that you're going through something, but there ought to be somebody that you can be open enough to. And what that says to me, Miss Margaret, about you and I, is there are not many people that we trust with our heart. I use this scenario with my clients. You have to have somebody that you feel safe with. I feel safe enough to be vulnerable. So now I have friends. I have at least one, and then I have my sister who I can say, I'm not okay today. I'm not having a good day. And my friend laughs because I'll call him sometime and I'll be like, just tell me what to do. I don't want to figure it out. And he was like, people would never believe that that's you, but I need to be that person too. Everybody needs to know somebody is in tune enough with me that they're not going to let me just say, I'm fine. No, you're not. And we going to sit right here and we going to figure this thing out. And that's what your personality and my personality type needs. While Jamie and Tremaine, they need people who say, you know what, hey, I know you're not okay, and I'm here, not to fix it. Because my sister and I have talked about this before. When you're grieving, some of the worst things that happen is when people try to fix it. You can't fix it. I have to go through it. But while I'm going through it, just be here. It's okay to be silent beside me. It's okay to just walk me through. It's okay to just listen. But don't, that everybody, but knowing what you need. I think that's the key. What do I need in those moments, and making sure that we have that.
Before we go to the other panelists, I want to say, in response to what Kelly said, that is a wonderful observation. Like, because Tremaine and I both needed to be heard, and we don't want to assume that you hear us. We want you to say, what you're feeling, what you're going through is important, and I'm listening. Whereas Kelly and Miss Margaret, as she pointed out, their personalities were, yes, I'm going through something, but I'm gonna fix it. And I'm gonna share this with you all, my sisters on here, because we're always telling each other's business. Okay. When I was going through this, and she pointed out she's a task. You can't hear me?
She's on mute.
Kelly's on mute.
But I don't hear you as loud as I heard you before.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, Matilda, because everybody else is hearing.
Nobody's having that problem but me.
Family members, I tell you. But listen, two things I want to say. When this happened, when I was admitted to the hospital, and as I said, the whole, my mother and father came, and they were all like, we're gonna pray, blah, blah, blah. My mother was like, I just talked to her yesterday, nothing was wrong with her. What happened to her that fast? And the counselor was like, no, this didn't happen since yesterday. And my sister, as she pointed out, who's extremely, she was task driven. She and I kind of balance each other out because she's very task driven and I'm people driven. And her response was, sitting there in the counselor's room, was, I just need to know, is she staying? Are you all keeping her? Is she going home or not? Because I have a flight to catch to Florida. Because if she's staying, then I'll know where she is and I'll know what, I need to fix something up.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I
really?
remember that. Yeah, you did. You were on your way to Florida to see Latan family. And I remember plain as day thinking to myself, what in the entire hell would make her say that? But then that's who she was. She had a flight to catch. She was, on a mission. If I was going to be there at the hospital, there really wasn't nothing she could do. That's how her thought process is. There's nothing she could do. If I'm in the hospital, she's going to go on and take care of what she got to take care of. And for years, that just disturbed me. I never said anything, but it just bothered me that it was more important to her to go to Florida than to be there. But again, that's me and Jermaine. And here's the other thing. Both of my parents were ministers, okay? They're deceased now, but they always were praying for people. Always, people were coming to them, telling them their problems. Always calling people out in the middle of a church service saying, God revealed this to me that you're going through X, Y, Z. I want you to whatever. And I kept saying to myself, how come they don't see what I'm going through? Like, I started being molested somewhere around age 6, 7, 8 by a married cousin. And we would go stay with them. My sister and I would go to their house every summer in New York. And it wasn't until I was like maybe 19 that I told my sister about it. And it wasn't until I went into admitted in the hospital at 32 that I told other people about it. So that's all those years I was carrying that. But these people who everybody kept talking about how spiritual they were and how much insight they had, they never saw that whole time. And so that was a whole nother thing that as my sister said, that it was in my closet, because you can see everybody else, but you can't see me. And so it all exploded in May of 1995. All of the anxiety, the hatred, the bitterness, all of that exploded and brought me to that place that began my journey to healing. So Shante, share a little bit with us about your experience with depression and maybe suicide. What brought you to that place and how did you decide that you needed help?
Mine was again compacted, as Kelly has said, from a lot of things. A lot of traumas from my childhood, from being molested, going through foster care, from seeing my mom, aunts abused like tremendously. It was to the point where it was just like I just was packing everything down. I didn't really have an outlet. My trust for people was shot. I was in school and things like that. I had counselors. I had people around me as well that was probably available to talk to, but my trust in people was gone. Like, people that were close to me were the ones that hurt me. So now how am I going to talk to a perfect stranger? So I kind of had that mindset even as a kid. And so coming up, I turned to substance abuse, which I would get drunk most of the time. So I turned to alcohol. And with doing that, I found that when I started to drink, I would start to talk about it. But I allowed it to take my voice, because talking about it to people that was around me kind of shut me up, because they would say, oh, here she goes again. She's acting crazy again, this, that, and the third. And so I allowed that to steal my identity. I allowed that to steal my voice. And so I just continued to compact everything up into my adulthood. I didn't come out and actually tell my mom what had happened until I was 29 years old. Mind you, this happened when I was a child. So I didn't come out and tell my mom what happened until I was 29 years old. So you have all these years of things that was compacted. I remember nights when I used to just drink myself to sleep, and I would take, am I stopped? Can you guys hear me? Oh, my internet stopped. Sorry. I remember nights when I would just drink and pop pills together to just pray and ask God to just take me while I was sleeping, because I was hurting so bad. And I was like, I had no outlet, I felt like. And again, it was one of those things like, okay, I'm screaming, I'm acting out, I'm doing all these things, going to family functions, flipping tables, fussing and fighting with everyone. I'm like, no one could understand that I was really hurting. But then again, I didn't really voice that what had really happened to make me do these things and turn to this rage. So again, fast forward, I didn't tell my mom until I was 29. And then that was when she had told me, like, I shouldn't have felt like I couldn't come and tell her anything. But I'm just thinking, like, seeing her get abused, seeing different ones in the family get abused and things like that. So I'm just like, I really didn't feel safe. I didn't really feel safe. And even coming into adulthood, I needed that reassurance. As you guys were speaking about before, just needed a lot of reassurance. Always felt like I wasn't loved, things like that. I went through that rejection, abandonment, kind of like that orphan type thing. I went through all those feelings. And so what I did in turn, I broke down. Like I kind of broke down. All that stuff suppressed, and then it was just like a bomb went off, and it was to the point where it was just one of those things where I just couldn't control it. I just had to let those feelings be those feelings, and I just had to let everything out. And it was one of those things where you just cry, and then it's like you deplete so much of yourself. As Miss Margaret said, it was just like the next day, only thing I could do was just sleep. It was just like I was just so tired, I just slept. And then some days it was like I couldn't get out of bed. Like I would rather just lay there and just have all the lights off, the curtain closed, just be totally dark and just lay there. I don't want anyone to bother me or anything. It was one of those type things. And then most recently, when I had like a fallback, would have been 2 years ago when my brother passed, only for the fact that I was the last one to see him when he was alive. I had just got off of work. We ate dinner together, actually, and I went outside to get some fresh air and to charge my phone in the truck and listen to music. And by the time I got back in there, he had passed. So it was like one of those things where I was just like, okay, God. But it's like I know. And then like I heard Kelly talk about it earlier, where we had this persona, coming up, that Black women were supposed to be these strong figures, what I mean? Like we couldn't show a sign of weakness. And so it's like, that's all I knew all my life. And I'm like, even watching different ones in my family growing up, be these strong figures going through so many things. And it's like, you really didn't have an outlet. It's like, what did you do? You just put on that cape, like to be strong for everybody else. And then you're falling weak yourself. So that's kind of the mindset that I carried on. And so it's like, now I decided to become what I needed. So like I have ones around me, and it's almost like I can pick up on them when they're going through certain things, because it relates to the same things that I was going through when I was crying out, in those times. So it's like, even when you can say, oh, am I okay? And they say, yeah, I'm okay, or whatever. But it's like, you can pick up that they're not, that there's something going on, because again, it's like things that I was going through when I was crying out, and I know the things, and I can watch like what they're doing and what I went through kind of similar. So I knew like they really, are looking for that help. And so again, I just became what I needed. Learned to talk about it more, journaling more, and then not keeping it all in, not suppressing everything like I used to. Like I don't care now who it upsets or who gets mad, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that have to live this life. I'm the one that had to go through all that pain, things like that. And it's like, it's not fair. And then again, I can't allow that to steal my voice, because my voice is connected to someone else's freedom.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you. Now, I do want to say that we are at the 1 o'clock, and I promise you guys that we would do this 12 to 1. So if anybody needs to leave, I do understand and I appreciate it. But I'm going to be here as long as anybody wants to keep talking until a hurricane comes to the door that I told you all about. I'm surprised I haven't heard him banging on the door yet. His dad must really be keeping him occupied. Jason, you and I have talked a lot, and I've seen you share some on social media about some of the challenges you had that have caused you to deal with depression or anxiety or frustration, however it's defined at that moment. What would you say would be a main life event or a specific time in your life when you realized that you were battling depression?
I think for me, it was very similar to Miss Margaret's story. While I didn't lose a spouse, my mother died unexpectedly. And, you know, when you lose someone, you grieve, right? But for me, that grief felt different than any grief that I had ever experienced before. And I know that losing a mom is a traumatic experience. It's something that, you know, we will handle differently, but it just something felt off about it. And I remember, just like Ms. Margaret, I didn't have time to grieve. I had to go directly into business mode. I had to plan my mom's funeral because no one was stepping up to the plate. I was her oldest son. My brother wasn't working at the time. And so everything fell on me. And so I had to, you know, it was weird because when I got the call that my mother had passed away, I spoke to my brother and I told him, I cannot handle this right now. I need you to step up because I can't handle it, because I just dealt with my grandmother's death a few years earlier. And so I didn't immediately go home when my mother passed away. I went back to work as normal for a couple of days, and then I finally went home. And when I got home, nothing had been planned. And I'm asking, why has nothing taken place? And so, you know, long story short, I ended up having to plan everything after I got there anyway, because nothing had been done. And so after the funeral, I went back to work and I commuted into work from Baltimore to DC. And I just noticed that every day I was going into work, because I work in commercial real estate, so I didn't have the luxury of having downtime, right? So it was back to business as usual. And I noticed that I was crying all the time on my way into work, and I didn't know why I was crying. My mother had died, yes, but I wasn't grieving my mother to that extent. You know what I mean? I knew that there was something else that was going on, and I would just cry for no reason. And luckily, I was able to pull it together at work, and nobody was aware that I was going through this. And so I finally realized that I needed to speak to someone. And I had a therapist at the time, and I went to speak to her. And she immediately, because of all the loss I had endured, said, I think you might need to go on medication. And I was against medication. I was like, I'm not crazy, you know, and I didn't want anything to numb me. And I said to her, I want to feel, I just don't want to feel as much as I feel. And so she suggested that I go to a doctor, and she said, I think you need something that's going to take the edge off of what you are feeling so that you can process your feelings. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And so with talk therapy and with medication, my depression has been under control. I will say, you know, a lot of the panelists have talked about suicide. I never really had suicidal ideation until probably the last 3 years. And that was because it wasn't that I was thinking about killing myself. It was, I kept having this recurring thought. I understand people who take their lives. And it was weird to me that I kept having that thought, and it scared me. And so I went to my doctor again. And so they had to adjust my medication because it was causing this suicidal thought, although it wasn't necessarily directed at me. I was having at a point where I was understanding why people could kill themselves. And in explaining that to people, especially my husband, they were troubled by the fact that I could understand that. And so it was a moment where I was like, okay, this isn't normal, but I probably need to see someone. And so that's what I did. And they changed my medication, and which was medication I've been on for years. I'm on a different medication and I feel great. And, you know, there are times when, and I think this is a really important thing to say, you know, people who have, you know, it's hard to say that my depression is a mental illness, but it is a mental illness, right? And sometimes people get better because they're on the medication and they think that they can go off their meds. And I have done that with the supervision of my doctor, and I have been off at times for 3 years at a time or so. But I am also very keenly aware of my mindset and my body, so that I know that, okay, so I feel it coming, so I can immediately go back to my doctor and say, I think I need to go back on my meds again. And so it's a strange thing. And, you know, I haven't done that in a number of years, but it did happen for me. But it wasn't that I thought I was well. It was just that I was in a place where I felt really good. And I was curious how I could function without that medication, but I wanted to do it the right way. And so with my doctor's assistance, I was able to go off that medication, and I was fine for, again, maybe 3 years. And then that darkness just appeared again. And that is a very scary place to be. And it's a very scary thing when when you see it coming, but you can't ward it off. So I'm just really thankful that, I tell people I should literally be crazy with everything that I've endured, but I'm so thankful that even through it all, I can sit here with you today and talk about something that, has taken so many people away, but yet here we are sitting here talking about it and actually celebrating it, in a way. And I'm just really thankful.
I am so thankful for each of you that you agreed to come and sit with me today. And I want to ask Kelly to respond to something in a minute from a therapeutic viewpoint. But I was listening as you were talking, and it is challenging for us in our communities. And that's why we want to change this narrative to admit, number one, that we are having mental health challenges, because we all grew up hearing people use the word crazy. You go to family reunions, you got that one relative that everybody always, oh God, here comes crazy Uncle John, because you don't know what Uncle John's going to say or do or what have you. And my sister can tell you, when I was diagnosed with major depression and anxiety disorder, the word crazy triggered me. When somebody would say, oh, you crazy, after this happened, I just would break down crying. And I remember calling one of my aunts, she's deceased now, but I just was screaming in the phone, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy. They keep saying I'm crazy. And she's like, no, you're not crazy. So that word, for years, I couldn't even jokingly hear anybody say that, because I didn't want to be crazy. I didn't want to be labeled crazy. But one of my questions, or I don't know if it's a question or not, but you said that you took the medication for a while and then you stopped taking the medication. What is a reason that you all think, and then maybe Kelly can tell us from a therapeutic viewpoint, that we will take medication for high blood pressure, we will take medication for diabetes, we will take medication for anything, even though they do have, list side effects on it, whatever. But when it comes to taking something that will adjust the chemicals in our brain or whatever, we're like, I don't want to take that. Like, no, because I don't want to get started on that, because it's like you think you're going to turn into a psycho or what, I don't know. But did you have any initial hesitation about it, or you already said you had hesitation? But after you got on it and you recognized that something was going wrong, did you want to just not take any medicine, or were you okay with just switching this?
For me, it was weird because, you know, I was against the medication at first, but then, you know, I went to the doctor and he did prescribe something. I can't even remember what it was at the time. And, you know, I remember it vividly. He said to me, "You probably won't feel any different for about 2 to 3 weeks." The same day that I took the pill, I looked up at the sky and I was smiling for no reason. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, something is going on here. Right? So I was like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on, but I feel better, right?
Oh, wow.
So, and it was almost immediate for me. And so I knew that, okay, so something is wired wrong with me, and this pill is manipulating it so that I feel better, right? So I was able to remove that stigma that I had, that because I knew I wasn't crazy, I just knew that something was wrong with my brain and I needed some help. And I knew it was beyond traditional grief that I was experiencing. It was heavier than that. And so for me, it was a lifesaver. I can't even imagine not having experienced medication to help with my depression, because I'm not sure that I would be here if it were not for that medication. And again, there are times when I have been off and I feel just as wonderful as I do on the medication, but eventually that cloud comes back. And so I realize that that's something that I'm going to always have to carry. And I had to be okay with that. And so for me personally, I've removed the stigma. And I do have friends that I think need to be medicated, but they refuse to go on medication for a host of reasons. And, you know, I respect that, but I just know that it saved me.
I am so glad you mentioned that, because that is.
Excuse me real quick. I'm sorry
Yes,
to
ma'am.
interrupt. I'm just gonna pop out.
Okay.
I gotta pop out. I'm not gone, but I just gotta pop out for a few minutes. Okay, I'm
Yes,
still
ma'am.
here.
Okay, Ms. Margaret. But I want to say, before I ask Kelly some questions, I want to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jason. I think that's a very important issue, because if you notice, even when we talk about accepting mental illnesses, mental health concerns or whatever, we still are kind of skittish about when it comes to the medicine part.
Right.
Like we'll say, yes, I admit I was depressed. Yes, I admit whatever. But
we won't tell what we did.
right. Like you say, what did you do? What tools do you use?
Right.
Well, you know, I talked to somebody, but I'm fine now.
Right.
Okay, but you don't tell us that for a whole 2-3 years you were on medication.
Right.
Because like you just is a part of that whole stigma thing. So I am so glad that you mentioned that. And I did want to ask Kelly to share with us with regard to the different tools that you recommend to your clients. And then if anybody wants to share anything like Jason did about what works for you, I would love to hear that. All right, Kelly, let's go.
I did want to say something in reference to what Jason said. And that is that as a therapist, I work side by side with psychiatrists who actually write out the prescriptions. And I have a lot of people who come to me initially and be like, no, I just want therapy. I don't really want no medicine. And my response to that is, that's fine. But I encourage them to go get an evaluation from our psychiatrist. And I say this, I say, right now, you may feel like that, you know, talking to me will be helpful, but there may be times, and the thing is, when we take medicine, it's not that we are going to necessarily have to take it for the rest of our life. Sometimes it's situational, like you could be in crisis and need some extra support. You always have the option to say no. You always have the option to, to tell them I don't want to take medicine, but I wouldn't totally erase that from options. Again, I'm a person, a part of my therapy is I'm very transparent. And, just a couple years ago, I was going through a really hard time in my marriage and having a really rough time. And one of the psychiatrists that I work with is a very good friend of mine. And I just sat down with her. I was like, I think I need something, because I'm telling you, I can't focus on my whole day. I feel like I'm spending my whole day just spinning my wheels. I know I'm working, but I don't feel productive. I can't stay focused. And I already have ADHD. I made a conscious choice not to medicate it, because it wasn't that I don't want the medicine. My son actually had ADHD and was taking medicine, and sometimes I'd pop on his pills. Don't tell nobody. But overall, I learned how to create like the disciplines to keep me on task. What do I need to keep me on task? And knowing these things, like what distracts me, you know what I mean? I can't use my computer where I can access Facebook or check my email, or because I'll go to the side in the middle of my work. I have to be in an environment that's work conducive. And so I did what I had to do, but I realized that even all of those things were not helping me. Having those tools in place, I still was not having productive days. And it was reflective, not in my therapy to other people, but in my paperwork that I had to submit about it. And so my supervisor's like, hey, this is not you. What's going on with your work? So I had to take Zoloft. And I tell people I took Zoloft through that time until I could come to a place where I felt like, okay, life is back to a place where I can manage it. Now, what we did is the same thing that I heard Jason say, like, we started me off on a low dose, and I was like, that ain't helping. We moved me up. That is helping a little bit. Then we moved me up. And she was like, I think this is where you really need to be. I stayed there and I continued to take it. And then we started bringing me back down, but it's always open that if I feel overwhelmed and I'm not handling things well, I'll pop them Zoloft, I'll get back in it. And one of the things that happens though, and I heard Jason say this, I have so many people that come into me and it's like, because I always say, how's the medication doing? Like, do you feel you need a higher dosage? Do you feel you need a lower dosage? And they're like, I haven't taken it. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because I feel better. Well, you do realize you're feeling better because of the medicine. So then when they stop taking it, everything crumbles. And I always say coping skills for any disorder is like a juggling balls act. If all of the balls are in play, the medicine, the therapy, the life, you can keep a rhythm and keep it going. But if one of those balls drop, either you have to drop all the balls or you have to find a new rhythm. So rather than do that, I encourage people, like Jason said, if you're going to stop doing medicine or whatever, I wouldn't without that. But I will address that the stigma in African American, especially culture, is we don't like to talk about things, matters of the heart, period. In either way, whether we believe in God or we believe in nothing, whether we feel like anything that deals with me having feelings about it, emotional experiences about it, I don't want to talk about that. I will handle it. I was looking at something around suicide, and they're saying over the last couple of years that the numbers have gone down, but they've actually increased in the African American culture, in the American Native culture, and in the Hispanic culture. And those are the three cultures that never really had those issues before. But what is happening now is everybody is experiencing anxiety around this new world that we're living in that's different. And it's affected everything that our life touches. So I tell people, when you have a disorder, and whether it's a physical disorder, a mental disorder, or something, it's your world that you live in. And now all we need to figure out is how can you live healthy and safe with the parameters of the world that you've been given. If you only have one leg, then how do we live a healthy, productive life with the one leg? I mean, so if you have it's the same thing. There's no difference in having a bad heart, and that means that there are certain things I'm restricted from doing, or having asthma, and there's certain things I'm restricted from doing, or having depression, and there's certain things that I realize I can't sit up and watch these movies. I tell my sister sometime around anxiety, get off of social media for a minute, because all of that negativity doesn't help you when you're already anxious. I live in Philadelphia, and so I have to be very selective about watching the news. Every day, hundreds of people up here are dying. I mean, my husband works in a fast food place, and the man literally walked up to the boy in the drive-thru and shot him in the head. You know, people are just shooting people, killing people. This is all the time. I cannot listen to that every day and then come back and do what I do every day, because that's too much on top of too much for me. And so I have to know. So I don't do a lot of social media or anything like that, because I have to keep my healthy mind guarded to be open to help other people. So I think when we know this is my world and these are the things that's in it, if depression's in it, how do I live a healthy life with depression in it? I did want to say one other thing that was very important, and Jamie and I talked about this briefly, called about being an empath. And I thought about Shantae, and I thought about how when you've experienced a lot of traumas and things, you become very sensitive to other people and their traumas. I won't say danger, I'm going to say the challenge to that is knowing how to, again, build boundaries around how much I'm allowed myself to feel for these other people, and how much of that I take in. And that's why, you know, when I first started in therapy, the very first thing they told us in the master's classes was every therapist needs a therapist. Every empath, every person that's sensitive to other people needs somewhere that you can dump their stuff. One of the reasons why, even as a therapist, I still have supervision with my supervisor once a week to dump some of this stuff. And there are times when I can't even wait to the supervision. I will leave a session and I'll pick up the phone and say, oh my God, Gabe, this. And we got to talk about it, because I got to get ready to clear myself of that and go to the next thing. It's an awareness. It's an awareness of your need. And I want you, especially you and Jamie are definitely empathetic people, and you feel people's pain, but you got to be mindful and not selfish, but self-aware to say, sometime I can't today. Today, I can't do that. And then if you find, like Jason said, that you find yourself crying uncontrollably or thinking about, because some medicines do give you suicidal thoughts. So when you find yourself stuck in that, it's okay to say to your therapist, you know, lately I've been thinking quite a bit. And a good therapist will say, well, I mean, let's talk about, you know, you having a conversation with the psychiatrist about something. It doesn't have to be permanent. But I get up every morning and pop something from my sinuses because I have allergies all year long. So I take something every day to keep me clear. So why would I not want to do something for my mind to keep that clear? If the doctor told you you need to take a pill to keep your heart ticking every day, you'd pop that pill every day.
That's right.
So if you can get something that just helps you, like Jason said, to look up at the sun and smile, well, don't you want to feel that? I mean, you don't want to
Jason
always.
is just weird anyway. If you look at Jason is weird anyway.
That's
you,
not weird to look at the sun and
if
smile.
you look at Jason's Facebook post, he's out there talking to birds and ducks. And
Well, can
all
I
of
tell
that.
you something that Jason has touched life? Because one of the other things about our culture gets, and you and I have talked about this. And like Jamie said, I'm a minister, you know, in the Christian faith, but I'm also very aware of we are three-part beings, and I'm very aware of our connection with nature. I'm very aware of our connection with, listen, the changing of the moon, all of that. Because when that moon goes full, my kids on my caseload go crazy. The crisis centers are full. You ain't gonna tell me that's a coincidence. That is because it is something I believe that we we are in tune. We should be in tune with nature, just like we're in tune with God, because he's the creator of all things. So I get it, Jason. Don't you let Jamie stop you from doing what's natural.
That's right.
Natural.
That's right.
That's natural. And that's what's wrong with a lot of, and God knows I love the Christian people. I do. I preach to them all the time. But I wish they would be more conscious of the other parts of their life.
Yeah.
I wish they didn't just think everything was, oh, I'm gonna pray about it. Oh, we should pray about it. Oh, you just need to pray about it. No. Because God has made me a three-part being. And I use analogies so people are real. Because if I'm a Christian and I go to bed with my husband, he don't want me quoting scriptures talking about, you know, I was just thinking about the goodness of the Lord, honey. I mean, he's like, wait a minute, sis, I'm trying to work on something else over here. So in reality, we've got to be aware.
Tremaine is newlywed, so he needs to hear that.
Yeah. Listen, I'll tell y'all a funny story. I used to be a really bad person, and I'll own it. I used to stay suspended in school for cussing and fighting. And you know, I didn't come out of that till I was like 20 something years old. I was clubbing and in with gunfights and the whole nine. So I had a really filthy mouth. And I remember when I gave my life to the Lord, I used to curse all the time. And my boyfriend at the time said to me, do you kiss your mom with that same mouth? Because that's a filthy mouth. So he got cussed out. So anyway, but when I gave my heart to the Lord and I got married, when I first was having, you know, the wedding stuff, you know what you do in the marriage bed.
Oh my God.
I didn't want to curse. So I kept saying, oh, Jesus, oh God, oh, Jesus, oh God. And when I got done, my husband was like, well, was Jesus doing you or was I doing you? And I was like, I didn't want to say a bad word. I'm trying to be a Christian. But he was like, well, my God, Kel, I mean, I get it. But you just like, you could have said my name or something. But my point with that was we got to have balance. And I think that is what the reason why a lot of church people are now finally getting the light bulb on and got so much stuff that they got to deal with, because we weren't allowed to have balance. You come to church and you have an experience, and then you go home and you deal with stuff that's real, and you don't know who to talk to about it because your pastor's going to pray and somebody else in the church is just they're going to try to tell you like what you need to do, when really you just need to connect with the creator.
I don't know why her microphone keeps going on.
My mother-in-law keeps trying to call me. She's like my husband. It's like, if you don't answer the first time, they just keep calling. Well, apparently I can't answer, but anyway. But that's what I think is important. And I would say that to all of you, is to find the balance where I'm a Christian, I love God, but I'm going to be like Jason. I go sit outside and I just look at the birds and I just look at the leaves and I just appreciate nature, and I get in touch with that side of me too.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Mental health. Wait a minute, tell them, let me put a plug in. I have a therapy set called TFOL. It's called Therapy for Abundant Life. And it's on my website, aflavoredlife.com. And I do group sessions and stuff. And I'm getting ready to do a group session around.
Don't laugh, Miss Margaret, don't laugh.
It says, I'm grateful.
No,
but
I'm sorry, Kelly. I'm not laughing because I'm laughing at her. I am just so enjoying your sister so much that I'm ready to ask you to post her website on your page so I can hear some more of her. That's it. I'm not laughing at her. I'm enjoying her. Yeah.
Listen, here's the thing. It's called, it's called I'm grateful, but I'm still stressed. I'm just been so popular. Everybody's calling me.
I mean, really, but listen, when I can't even talk. Once I
I'll
load
put it
this,
in the chat.
yeah, put it in the chat. And then also when I upload the video to Facebook, you could also put it in there as well. So you and Jason can get together and look at birds and ducks and stuff.
That's right, Jason. We're gonna
I
go
got
watch
you.
nature.
That's right.
Well, I want to go. I want to
You can go too. You can
Don't go, Miss Mark. Don't go, Miss Mark.
No, they talking my leg.
Jason, where you live at?
Baltimore.
Okay, I live in Philly. You know, we ain't that far.
So we're close.
Yes.
Well, you
Miss
know what,
Margaret,
Jason,
where are
be
you?
quiet. Because
Oh.
I asked you to come to the Eastern Shore to see me and you ain't come yet. So just be quiet.
I'm
Miss
coming.
Margaret, where are you? Where are you, Miss Margaret?
I'm in Georgia.
I'll be down there soon. I'll be down there
Okay.
soon.
Okay, all right. Because I'm sorry, Jasmina. She talking my language. She talking. I mean, her approach to Christianity. Man, that struck like a chord with me. Yes, sister. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself now.
It has definitely hurt a lot of people. And I mean, leaders. I have people, and I actually have pastors and bishops that are now over organizations that are saying to me, can you come and talk to our pastors? Like, can they have sessions with you? Because it's stop pretending you okay. You're not okay. And it's okay not to be okay. I said, as long as you're not okay, I got a job.
Oh, Lord.
Right, Jason?
Be quiet,
Well, not-
Jason. Tremaine, you all right over
Tremaine?
there?
We're good.
You good? Okay. I love you. And I'm very proud of where you are. I'm proud of what you have accomplished. And I thank you for sharing that part about before we started recording, I mentioned to you our concerns about my grandson and possibly having being autistic or what have you, because he's not talking. And so the fact that you shared that personal part of you really means a lot to me. And I will share that with his parents as well. Because, it may not be that autism. Maybe he just doesn't have to talk, so he doesn't talk. But whatever the case may be, I just don't want us to be people that say, nothing's wrong with my child, ain't nothing wrong with my child, leave my child alone. I would rather know than not know. Right. So I appreciate you sharing that part of you. And so we're going to get ready to go, but I do want to say that first, does anybody have anything else that you'd like to share before we go?
I forgive Shantae.
She forgives. She says she forgives you, Shantae.
Thank you.
Lord help us. But I do want to say, as we conclude our time together, that I salute each of you individually for your bravery and your transparency and your willingness to just tell your stories, because I believe, and I speak this into existence, that your sharing today is not only going to change lives, but is going to save lives. Mm. I appreciate you guys more than I know how to verbalize. I'm new at this whole talk show thing, but I appreciate you guys supporting me, and neither one of you hesitated, like you immediately responded, and that means so much to me. And I'd like you to do me a favor, if you would. When I upload the video from YouTube, would you guys do me a favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel? I really don't understand why I'm not getting subscribers, because honestly, I think I have great content on my YouTube channel. And people keep saying to me, well, it doesn't matter about the numbers. Okay, it may not matter to you, but I would like to understand why I have over 1,000 views, but only 40 subscribers. Like,
We got you.
Yeah, and you know what, you gotta keep saying it too, because like that's one of the things I noticed when people are doing their YouTube slots, Jamie, that they do say it at least 4 or 5 times in their time. They'll be like, hey, if
Okay.
you're enjoying this, please subscribe. Hey, if you're enjoying this, please share. So sometimes it's just a repetition of like reminding people. It's not that they wouldn't, because like I subscribed and I shared, but I
Oh,
didn't do
ain't
it
that
right
sweet?
away.
Thank
But I
you.
didn't do it right away because you didn't remind me.
Whatever. All right, guys. Seriously, y'all pray for Kelly, because she has a lot of issues and challenges. But I think she's coming down next week for Thanksgiving. It'll just be the 2 of us. I want you to share this real quick, Kelly, and then we're going to let everybody go. Right after our parents died, and I had to have a major surgery, and tell them about when you were in the waiting room and they called for the family of Jinx and Green.
This is so relevant to Jamie because she brings it up a lot, but the reality of the fact that it was my parents, and they had 3 daughters, and my oldest sister passed away, and then my dad passed away, and then 3 months later my mom passed away. So a couple months later Jamie had to have major surgery, and so I went in. I came down to go with her, and in the waiting area they always come out when the surgery's over and they say family of whoever, so you can go in the back and see them. So the lady said, family of Jamesina Green, and I got up to go back there, and the lady looked behind me and she was like, where the other people at? And I says, it's just me. And the reality hit Jamie that day, and me too, that basically we're all we got. So at this point, it is our responsibility to be that the bearers of carrying the legacy to the next generation. So that's really important to Jamie, because she mentioned it and I say to her, so we all we got. So the only reason she wants me to come down next week, Jason, is because I'm gonna cook Thanksgiving dinner. It's not that she cares whether I'm there or not.
I get it now.
Because I'm all she's got.
Okay, then, well, let's get ready to close. I do want to say that I pray that you all continue in your healing journey, that any broken or bruised areas will continue to be healed. And I'm here anytime you need me. All jokes aside, I do have like a really dry sense of humor, so I'm told. But I really love people, and I really care about whatever you care about, I care about. All right, so you all have a great day, and we will talk soon. I love you, Jason, so much. You're my boo. Tremaine, thank you for agreeing to join us here today without hesitation. Miss Margaret, you my girl. Now, Kelly, since you and Miss Margaret gonna be bosom buddies now, she needs you to go online on her website and buy all her books. Thank you very much.
Okay, you ain't
Look
saying
her up,
no.
look her up. Margaret Johnson Hodge. She's got them books behind her. Kelly's not even looking.
Yes, those are you. All right, sis.
Y'all so silly.
I'll be down there. Shantae, I'll be over there. Okay.
Y'all so silly. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. God bless you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. God bless you too.
Bye, Kelly.